And you can get away with that when you're 25 and 35 and maybe 45. But as we get into our 50s and 60s and 70s, all these little things that we are doing now and we've been doing, they start to add up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Food Matters podcast, your home for nutrition, health, and wellness education. My name is Laurentine. I am a filmmaker and a nutritionist and the founder of foodmatters.com, and I'm here to hold your hand on this journey to optimum health, transformation, and emotional healing. Hello, everybody. We're doing something really special today. As we get close to the end of the year, we've been reflecting on what our community has loved, so we've wrapped our most popular podcast episodes of 2023 into one episode. From optimizing your brain health, improving your sleep, unlocking your unlimited potential, gut health, and everything in between, these are the top downloaded episodes of the year. Let's start with our 5th most downloaded episode of 2023 on the topic of sleep.
They did a study and they found that when they were giving individuals the same amount of calories and allowing them to exercise the same amount, the only variable that they changed was the amount of sleep that they allowed them to have. So for 2 weeks, they allowed this group of individuals to sleep for 8.5 hours. Then they had a washout period. And then they allowed them, the same individuals, to sleep for 5.5 hours. They were attempting for them to lose weight, so they were having a restricted calorie diet, and they were controlling how much exercise they did. So everything was the same. The only thing that changed was the amount of sleep that they had. When they were sleeping 8.5 hours, they lost 55% more body fat. The only thing that changed was the sleep. They were eating the exact same calories. They were exercising the exact same amount. They were the same individuals. So you can't say it was individual difference. The only thing that changed was the amount of sleep that they had. Now, why does this happen? This is largely related to the changes in body composition, which come as a result of the hormonal changes as of lack of sleep. Now, I mentioned before, cortisol increases by 37%. That not only makes you feel wired, anxious, unable to switch off, cortisol catabolizes your muscle mass. So what they actually found in this study, and so for anyone who is not familiar with that term, catabolize means breaks down. So when you're not sleeping enough, your muscles break down. As a result, lean muscle mass decreases. As a result, metabolism decreases. Hence, in both conditions, they lost weight, but the fat loss came from the condition 55% more body fat loss, which is a lot. That came from more sleep, 3 hours more sleep, right?
Yeah, wow.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Right? But there was another study about that was about the impact of lack of sleep on hunger hormones. So they found that when individuals were only allowed to sleep 4 hours per night, they had an increase in their hunger hormone ghrelin by 28%. They had a decrease in satiety hormone, leptin, by 18%. They had a 23% increase in their appetite. And specifically, they had a 45% increase in their cravings for sugary carbohydrates. So if anyone's listening to this and thinking, no wonder when I'm, after a bad night of sleep, I cannot, get away from the muffins or the cookies, the chocolate. This is not just your lack of willpower. This is the hunger hormones in your body being altered. Why do they have a preference for those sugary carbohydrates? because they give us the shortest burst of energy. They're easy to break down. A sugar breaks down much quicker than, and gives us a hit of energy much quicker than, a starchy carbohydrate
That's interesting.
or a complex carbohydrate, right?
Yeah.
And a lack of sleep, because we don't have the normal regeneration of things like serotonin, which gives us energy. It's an alerting hormone. We don't have complete production of human growth hormone. 70% of that is produced in slow wave sleep. This helps our cells repair and renew to be energized the next day. When we don't have this period where we get our growth hormone produced to that degree, the body is in a state of fatigue. And so it's all completely natural that as a result, we are reaching for sugary carbohydrates to give us that energy that we need.
That quick hit.
Yeah. They're two of my favorite studies that I love discussing around weight loss and lack of sleep and the impact. And I feel like that really resonates.
It's in a way what you're saying is like a lack of sleep is actually a stressor to the body. Like you're saying, like it raises cortisol levels. And whenever we raise cortisol levels, then the flow on effect of that is especially in a chronic state, like something that's experienced over a long period of time, is something that can be completely dangerous for health, human health. Now, not only in suppressing immune system function and leading to chronic disease, but like you're saying, also decreasing the satiation hormone, increasing cravings, especially for sugar and carbohydrates, which we know it's not fat that makes you fat, or at least everyone listening to this podcast knows that. It's sugar that makes you fat, and it's white, fluffy, processed carbohydrates that make you fat. So great study. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that people on a weight loss journey here would be certainly keying into probably more of our later part of the discussion about what we can do to sleep better. But second point that I brought up was around gut health. So, and we've spoken about the connection between stress and so forth. Now, what about sleep and gut health? Is there anything that connects those two together? Because I know it's such a huge thing for so many people.
Definitely. There is huge correlation between, gut health and lack of sleep. So overall, bodily inflammation increases with lack of sleep, and this includes in gut, by about 20%. Now, there is specifically a rise in pro-inflammatory cytokines, which signal to the body that there is something wrong. So overall, this happens in the gut as well. Now, what this leads to is a compromised gut microbiome. So there's been studies that have found that lack of sleep correlates with lack of diversity in the microbiome, which, as I'm sure you're aware, then compromises our overall well-being. Second to that, we need to recognize that with a compromised microbiome, we limit our ability to digest the sleep nutrients that we need for proper sleep.
Yeah.
It's a cycle. So lack of sleep correlates with a less diverse microbiome as well as increased inflammation, which therefore compromises our ability to absorb key sleep micronutrients, things like magnesium we all know about, but there's lesser awareness about the importance of nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin B, vitamin A. All of these nutrients correlate with longer sleep, deeper sleep, more restful sleep. And so when we compromise our gut composition, we have an impaired ability to absorb these nutrients, which therefore compromise our sleep even further. Outside of that, I think it's also really important to know that, when you are having a compromised microbiome, you also then compromise your ability to create serotonin, that sleepiness hormone. Serotonin, that happiness hormone.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, I think there's lesser awareness that in the darkness, serotonin is converted to melatonin,
Yeah, wow.
right? So 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. So if we're not sleeping enough, we compromise our gut health. Therefore, we compromise our serotonin production, which compromises happiness in itself. But in the evening, then we don't have serotonin, which is a precursor for melatonin, sleepiness hormone.
Next on our most downloaded list is an interview I did with Kathy Coyle on how powerful healing occurs when you immerse yourself in nature and use plant medicine. I loved this discussion with Kathy, and here's a snippet. And we did this beautiful practice where we dieted on rose, and we used rose in our diet every day. And we allowed the rose to start to speak to us, and you specifically asked us to go in nature for a night ritual. So an evening where we spent all night underneath the moon and the stars, and we received some divine wisdom, we received cleansing, we received healing. And could you tell us a little bit more, or tell the audience a little bit more about what the intention was of this type of, I guess, non-psychedelic spiritual evolution for people that are interested in just slowly starting ourselves out into the world of plant medicine?
That usually looks like a woman sort of choosing a reintroduction to the wild in a new way. And so I could say, maybe you can only manage 3 hours, because for some women, that's quite a big deal, sitting out without any technology in a remote area for 3 hours. It's enough for them because it's very, very new. Then kind of in your case, because you have a lot of experience being out in nature and being in remote locations and whatnot, a 12-hour overnight is accessible to you, that's digestible, and it also brings in just enough challenge that you're meeting the experience in a new way. And so what I like to do is bring a plant ally into the work. So usually if I'm working remotely, then I will work with the medicine of rose, because the rose the rose grows on every part of the earth. You will find roses, and it has one of the most vast root systems on the planet. So you have this sort of natural vibratory field of the rose that sort of spans across the planet. And so when we're working remotely, and say we're 13 women and we are all partaking in daily, sitting and meditating and drinking rose tea, and sitting with the rose, smelling the rose, body oiling with the rose, just bringing this consciousness really into our awareness in a new way. And then taking that journey to going out and sitting out under the moon for 12 hours, or potentially just sitting out in nature for 24 hours. Some women are ready for that sort of more intensive deep dive into the natural world. And what this does is it just really opens our subtle awareness of the communication of nature. So we're coming to nature with even more receptivity and openness to witness it, and to receive inspiration, to receive healing, to receive insight. I like to work with the vision quest element, or a mini vision quest element, with the women that I work with, especially the women who are kind of more leaders in their fields. So they're CEOs or psychiatrists or whatnot, and they're very, they're progressive in their field. And what this does is it creates a beautiful container for them to really go and just hear themselves on a very, very deep soul level, really give their soul opportunity to communicate, so that they can bring that medicine back to their communities. And I think that this is the guidance from all of the native tribes, all across the world. Each native culture has its own form of what the Native Americans would call the vision quest, or what we would call sitting out or nature vigiling. Every culture has this, where they would leave the village and go out into the wild, go out into nature for an extended period, and they would receive inspiration and insight and wisdom, and they'd also mature in that space. So they go through a kind of another layer of initiation into adulthood. And then when they come back, they've brought back that medicine and that wisdom for the village. So I really like to apply this when I'm working with women who are in leadership positions, that, okay, if you want to really lead and you want to be progressive about how you're leading, then we have to carve out this space for ourselves to really be able to hear ourselves think. And that means getting outside into nature, disconnecting from everything, and just simply sitting without distraction and observing how nature works, because there's so much inspiration when you observe all of the elements, the ecosystems, the fungi, the fruits, and when you observe all of this and really observe it for an extended window, then you bring that lesson and you bring that learning back with you.
Next up is our third most downloaded episode. This one is with Dr. John Demartini. Dr. John Demartini unlocks the psychology behind motivation to help you understand what's holding you back from being your best self.
And so for people listening, this idea of discovering purpose can be quite broad. I mean, my personal take on it, I'd like to hear if you feel I'm on track here, is in my experience, because I've gone from driving the type of ship that you're living on now. I used to be a ship's officer, tankers, container ships, passenger ferries, private yachts, all around the world. And I loved it, but I felt there was something more that I was destined to do. So I studied nutrition. I helped heal my father, which was this big sense of purpose in my life, to be this healing light for the person that gave me life. And then gone on to made 5 feature documentaries around health and nutrition and wellness. And now this defines who I am, and I feel on purpose. And I feel on purpose because I feel like I'm giving back. Is this the secret to purpose? To be giving, to be sharing information, to be helping others? Is that the secret here? And is that a good place for people to start if they're confused about where to start?
That's a great portion of it. Every human being has a set of priorities, a set of values that they live their life by, things that are most to least important, that's fingerprint specific to them, that's evolving as they evolve, but at any one moment, it's a set of priorities. Whatever is highest on that priority list is the most intrinsic value, and whatever's lower as you go down the list, it becomes more and more extrinsic. So the things that are at the top, you spontaneously are inspired to do. You feel you're in the flow, that you don't need to be reminded to do it. Nobody has to remind me for 50 years to teach and research and write. That's just me. I mean, I don't need motivation. You don't have, Johnny, go do your teaching, research, and writing. No one's had to tell me that. But anything other than that, I would need motivation. And I learned that anytime I have motivational needs in any way extrinsically, delegate it. So I don't do anything else. If I find that I have resistance to doing something, need to be reminded to do it, I hire somebody who loves doing that and let them take care of it for me so I don't have to be distracted. So I get on to teach, research, and write as I travel the world. That's it. Everything else is delegated. I don't cook. I don't drive. I don't clean. I don't do anything except teach, research, and write. That's it. I mean, I even tell my girlfriend, I said, look, if I can get, George Clooney or Brad Pitt or Gerard Butler or Hugh Jackman to make love with you on my behalf, would you allow me to do that? Because I need to delegate that tonight. I've never had to say anything except I would love you even more. because delegation is cool, man. That's a joke, by the way. I just talked to her just before we got on.
I know. And look, delegation is something that you need. It is a skill that takes time to learn. I mean, I did a test at our office with one of our board members called a Flippin' Profile, and it highlights your constraints as an entrepreneur in a team. So it gives you a 360 review of your personality as a leader. And one of my elements was low deference, a low capability to defer. to people for ideas or to defer projects to people. So the last 5 years, I worked on that constraint. I got better at it. And now I do more of what I'm aligned to, which is content, meetings, connecting people, big high level vision. And I have a great team around me. But I've done this for 15 years now. You've been doing this for coming up, 50, like you said. For people that are starting out, it seems maybe a little pretentious that they're going to go outsource their cooking when they can hardly pay their bills. If someone's starting out on aligning to purpose, how can they make that first step?
Well, your purpose is an expression of your highest value. Your ontological identity is an expression of your highest value. Your epistemological pursuit of knowledge is according to your highest value. That's the most key element. So if your life is not demonstrating what you say is important, what you say is important is BS. So that's one thing. People have this idea what they confuse fantasies with what they really value. I've seen this about 99% of the population. So most people, if you ask them, I want to be financially independent. Oh yeah, I want to be financial. No, you don't. You want to spend your money on the lifestyles of rich and famous and consume, depreciables instead of actually saving and investing and putting your money into asset accumulation that's going to patiently build wealth. Or you'll be on your way, buddy. People have fantasies about what they think they value, and they confuse that with what's important. So your hierarchy of values is dictating your destiny, and your highest value is the path of your purpose. And it's the most efficient, effective pathway to fulfill the greatest amount of voids with the greatest amount of value in your life. That's why it's so fulfilling. That's why when you do that, things start to kick into gear and work. Now, the people that go around and say, I don't know what my purpose is, they're not willing to look honestly at what their life is demonstrating through a drone's view, looking down on them. They are too busy filtering their reality based on what they think it should be, ought to be, supposed to be, got to be, have to be, must, need to be, from some outside authority that they're infatuated with. We're not here to put people on pedestals and minimize ourselves. We're here to put ourselves in our heart and basically do what's truly meaningful to us. And that's not putting people on pedestals or pits. That's putting them in a heart and getting on with what's meaningful. So I look at what your life demonstrates is important to you, not what you say. Because 99% of the time, I've been doing value determination 45 years. 99% of the time, people don't know what's really important to them. They think they do. But I've developed a method on how to determine that and get past the BS. It's not hard to do. It's about 30 minutes of work. But boy, is it eye-opening. Because you got unconscious motives making you do things that you don't know. I've never seen a person sabotage. I've seen people think they sabotage because they think they know what's important, but their life is demonstrating something different, and they're just fantasizing what's important instead of being true to what's important. And then setting goals that are matching what's really important, you will excel. You will take off the second you do. That's why I want to find out what that is, because the purpose is always there. It's there, but what we do is we compare ourselves to others and we miss out on it. I'm amazed. I had a lady in London at one of my breakthrough experience programs, which is my signature program. I've done 1,158 times. And this lady comes up to me on the second day of the program. She says, and we're sitting down and I'm outlining step by step things that a person can do about your purpose in life. And she said, well, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what my purpose is. And she's whining. And I said, stop. I got to stop. I said, what do you do every single day that nobody has to remind you to do, that you absolutely love doing, that you're inspired by? I don't know. I can't think of it. I said, stop. Just stop. Quit whining. Answer my question. Be accountable. I don't ask questions. I don't have answers to it. Look again. I said, what do you do every single day that you love doing, that you're inspired by, that you do every day that nobody has to remind you to do? And she said quietly, looking down, she says, I love spending time with my kids. I am definitely with my kids every day. I said, great. So if you looked at how you fill your space, would you say your kids are in your space most of the time? She goes, yes. Would you say that on most of your time of your day that your kids are in your time, most of the time you spend most of your time a day with your kids? Yes. Would you agree the thing that energizes you most is watching those kids develop and accomplish things and make progress and stuff? She says, yes. And if all of a sudden you look at all your money, is most of your money going to making sure that you're a good mother and taking care of the kids? She says, absolutely. I said, is that where you're most organized? She said, I got every day organized. I'm involved in homeschooling and I'm okay. And would you say you're most disciplined on that? Are you reliable to that? Without a doubt. And is your dominant thought the thing you've thought about the most about how you want your life and the thing that's coming true, would you say is revolving around raising beautiful children? She goes, yes. Is that what you visualize, being a great mother, watching your kids grow up and do something? And she says, yes. Is that what you talk to yourself about most? And when you converse with other people about most, is that what you typically bring the conversation to about your kids? And you ask people about their kids? He goes, you're nailing me. And is that what inspires you and brings tears to your eyes? Seeing them make progress and do great things, yes, brings tears to my eyes. And out of the goals you've had that are most consistent, persistent, is your kids involved in them? She says, yes. And when you learn anything, you're trying to learn about raising kids and being a mother? She says, that's mostly what I read. I said, your highest value is being a mother and being an inspired mother raising beautiful kids. She looked at me, she got teary-eyed. She said, is that enough? And I said, listen, Rose Kennedy from the Kennedy family, her mission statement I have in one of my books, handwritten by her. And her was, I dedicate my life to raising a family of world leaders. That was good enough. And look what she accomplished. I said, when I said that, she got teary-eyed, and I said, the only reason you're not acknowledging what it is that your life is obviously demonstrating is you're comparing yourself to somebody else. Who are you comparing yourself to? I think I know that, she says. There's a lady that's got a really big business, and she's also got 2 kids, and I've always admired her, how she can run a business and still have 2 kids. I said, does she have au pairs and nannies and people helping her? She says, yes. Are you really wanting to delegate to somebody else? She says, no. I said, you have a different set of values. If you compare yourself to any other human being on this planet that has a different set of values and you admire them and put them on a pedestal, you're going to minimize yourself in that area. But if you look at your own values and look at what's really important to you and look at your actions, you'll see you're congruent.
Coming in as the second most downloaded episode of the year is our interview with Jason Prow on sleep and longevity. Jason has so much to share on this topic. I really love this interview and how he specifically speaks on longevity. Who doesn't want to live well into their 80s, 90s, and beyond with good health?
We don't know anything. I mean, we really don't. I know people think that there's research out there and all this, but the truth is a human life is so long. You cannot study it, right? Let alone a population and try to weed out what's important and which factored into what, right? Like, as you mentioned, like there's so many people that are in their 90s, 100s, and they smoke and they drink and they do all these things that we know are unhealthy, right? And everybody listening to this probably has an uncle, a grandfather, a grandmother, somebody that broke some serious health rules and they lived to like 96, right? And they didn't lose. So this is where it gets confusing, interesting, and it's hard to really parse any of this stuff out and be confident in what contributes to what. What I'm comfortable saying is that the gratitude piece, the connection piece, and people talk about community, right? Like in the Blue Zones, they talk about community. I think that's a little off, right? It's actually not community, because right now we have a lot of community. What we're lacking is connection. Connection is the glue that holds community together. And that is the inherent quality that makes community so important, so valuable. So it's not this sort of elusive community, right? Because in fact, you can be a part of a community and feel totally alone, totally isolated. And that may actually be more harmful than not being a part of a community, because when you're a part of it and you don't feel a part of it, now you feel like something's wrong with me. They don't like me, right? So it's really the connection. And I think the connection becomes really interesting because, yes, connection with others, no question, right? Other people. But there's also connection with pets. And we know there's tons of research that has shown how much, household pets, domestic pets, bringing horses into hospitals. There's tons of data on this, and it lifts people's mood and improves their health outcomes across the board in every case. So a connection to a pet, right? But then we have connection to nature, let's say, like if you're more nature inclined, feeling one with the plants and the trees and the rivers and the mountains and the sky, like this can be so impactful for certain people. And I would argue that if everybody starts to do it, you're going to feel it. But then there's connection to God or spirit, right? Or oneness or the all, right? That's a different connection. And depending on your religious background or not, that might look something a little different. But then we have connection with ourselves, right? Which one could argue is the God within, but it is inherent with who am I, right? So there's connection there. So there's connection all over the place. And so working those connection pieces, I think, becomes insanely critical, like maybe the most important thing, right? So there's big parts. And then the trauma piece, like without getting too deep into that world, the core need when it comes to trauma is safety, right? That's what we didn't feel whenever a traumatic thing happens. It's a lack of safety. So there's fundamental human needs: safety, connection, right? Those are primary. And then the sort of more personal development side of gratitude, bringing awareness to the present moment, right? These things really do start to play a huge role too. So to me, this is where we kind of flip the whole thing on its head. And I came into this world with like exercise and nutrition, right? So that was like my core thing. And then I started going, wow, there's so much variability there, and it's nuanced, and it may change over one's life, and it depends on how sick or healthy they are. And my gosh, it's so interesting. Which just doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it, because it is a critical aspect to our interaction with the environment, right? Is fundamental. But yeah, these other pieces start to look very differently when you speak to these people, and the religious component, right? Like, and I didn't grow up in a religious household, but almost everybody I talked to, they had a really strong connection with God, right? Or Christ, or some version of what God represents. And for in Okinawa, they're more Shinto is the kind of thing, which is not really a religion. It's more of a spiritual kind of thing, connecting to ancestors. But nevertheless, there's some kind of connection with something that's not here on this planet. It's a little bit bigger than oneself. And that was a primary factor in the way that they felt about health and aging and longevity and dying and all that.
Beautiful. And I think this idea of connection is really profound. And like you say, there's more community and more groups and more social media than ever before, but it's actually that real connection. But I'm glad that you got to the self connection and the connection to a higher power as well, because those two things exist without needing anybody else. And Laurentine's grandmother, actually, towards those latter years, maybe the last 10 to 15, she spent a lot of time in solitude, but she didn't lose a sense of gratitude and happiness and
That's
connection. It
right.
was still there. It was strong, So
Yeah.
love hearing that. And yeah, really beautiful. One question I have, I guess, a little bit is taking us away from this sort of philosophical connection a little bit here, but more into data. Like, how do we measure longevity? And there's 2-3 really interesting inflection points, things that have happened, right? So we started measuring longevity. We're like, wow, look at us, Western developed humans, we're doing great. But actually we just stopped
Right.
infant mortality, right? That was the big thing that happened. So when we sort of got rid of infant mortality, cleaned up our hygiene a little bit, it meant that less babies died or less young children died. So therefore our longevity stats increased. But then many great doctors I've worked with say, hey, we're living longer, but we're dying longer. Right? There's this concept that we're actually just, once we're 50 or 60, we're just on this chronic illness sort of pathway and just sliding into the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the processed food industry, of which they love because they get this great customer that's sort of half dead, half alive for another 20 to 30 years. So then we start to look more deeply at longevity science now, and there's a few people in this space, and telomeres seem to come up quite a bit. And I feel like that's a pretty good measure for aging. It seems to be a little bit of the gold standard. And we need almost like a datum point, like we have on a chart with like a tidal point, which is like the lowest astronomical tide, right? Which everything references from. We need a datum point, which seems to be telomeres. And they get shorter and shorter as we die, like a shoestring type vibe. Is that a good basis point for us? And do you find that these long people, have they tested their telomeres? They have like longer telomeres compared to people that are similar age in a more developed country? Can we cover this a bit?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the telomere measurement sort of aspect is, well, let me put it this way. There is no consensus on how to measure biological age. Let's put it that way, right? Because we have the sort of calendar age, right? Or chronological age, right? Which is the time since birth. But there's actually no great way to measure biological age. We can look at telomeres, and that's fine. The data shows that it doesn't really give an estimation of chronological age or of biological age better than chronological age. And people are trying to put together all these different things, because the challenge with telomeres, and again, your point is very good, that they do sort of gauge the age at a biological perspective, but we have an enzyme called telomerase. So we can actually upregulate this enzyme that helps rebuild the telomeres. But then we also have other aspects to the genes that genetic damage beyond just telomeres being shortened. So there's all kinds of different damage aspects to the genetic blueprint, so to speak, that will confer all kinds of metabolic chaos at the cellular level. But then when we look at cancer, it's actually not about telomeres, it's about mitochondrial health. So mitochondria are these little organelles inside our cells, and we might have 10 or 500 in a cell, depending on how metabolically active, right? Like the brain, the heart, the liver, these are very metabolically active organs. So they have a lot of mitochondria. So if your mitochondria start to go, now you're actually tipping more toward cancer, right? Chronic fatigue, cancer, these type of things. And so that's going to determine age perhaps better than a telomere, because your mitochondria are losing their function. And so the other part with the telomere aspect that becomes challenging is that usually when they measure telomeres, they're measuring white blood cell. And so now we have to look at, okay, well, what are we measuring? Are we measuring the telomeres of your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidney? What vital organ that might fail are we actually measuring, right? And so they'll use the white blood cells as kind of this overall benchmark. But what I argue in the book is that aging, as we think about it, when it comes to the damage component, is actually organ and tissue specific. Nobody dies because their entire system shuts down, right? Like all at the same time. It's something fails, right? And it's usually perhaps related to the immune system, which is why white blood cells is an interesting one to measure, because usually what takes us down is some sort of infection, or the results of an infection that are a result of, again, sort of system-wide damage. And so, but again, people die of heart failure, right, and aneurysms, and all kinds of different reasons why people keel over. And so this is what becomes interesting. I could have, let's say, I can imagine a scenario where I have a 70-year-old liver, a 60-year-old brain, a 90-year-old heart, right? Biologically speaking, right? So this is where.
But then there's going to be a mean reading right out of your blood potentially. So there's something to be said to it. But like you said, it's true. If one organ's like kicking out at 98 and then it dies, then it's all over.
Right. So I might average those out, and it says, okay, my biological age is 80, my actual age is 82, and then but my heart age is 97, right? Like we're reaching the upper limit. So that becomes the challenge. And then the other aspect to aging is, what are we actually talking about? Because the telomere sort of argument falls into the sort of two categories of aging, right? One is sort of categories of aging theories. Let me put it that way. One is the damage theories, and there's a handful of damage. Some scientists argue that it's the mitochondrial that we should look at, right? And that determines how much reactive oxygen species are there, how much energy production, and it's the
like free
the
radical
damage to
damage,
mitochondria.
right? Yeah,
right. And some people argue it's the damage to the genetic code, right? So it's the human genome that is really the thing that we should look at. Some argue it's actually the cell membranes. And so it's membrane damage, and we should look at that. And that's the key to aging. And so the thing about all these different theories is that they're coming from people who are trying to solve the aging problem. And that's the first hint, is that we're categorizing aging as a problem, right? As this grand thing that we're trying to solve for. And I would argue, sort of philosophically, spiritually, and I think the evidence has my back here, none of us are getting out alive.
And lastly, our most downloaded episode of 2023 is on the topic of using adaptogens to optimize your brain health and boost your immunity. You guys love learning about plant medicine, and this interview has so much great information, especially this snippet about adaptogens.
Let's more talk about adaptogens, which is where your book goes deeper into. What are some other adaptogens that you talk about in the book in terms of top recommendations that you would have for people if they're looking to boost immunity and improve gut health in particular?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of famous adaptogens, and then there's less famous adaptogens. So famous adaptogens could be things like ginseng, turmeric, maybe ashwagandha these days. Ashwagandha, a lot of people know it. In the United States, ashwagandha has surpassed green juice in Google search volume. So It's not an easy word to spell out. So the fact that it exceeds green juice is pretty impressive. But for gut health specifically and immunity, besides what we mentioned, I really like turkey tail. It's used as a form of it is used as a popular cancer drug in Japan, particularly used for like breast cancer. We don't promote it for that purpose, but that's an extract of it. PSK and PSP are used in Japan for that purpose. But for us in the West, we can still benefit its immunomodulatory benefits for just general well-being and occasional immune support. Eulethero, which is also known as Siberian ginseng, would be another interesting product for immunity. It's a root. It's not really a ginseng. It's not part of the ginseng family, but it is one of the kind of first ever studied adaptogens. And besides gut health protection, is interesting for brain power and physical stamina, particularly in long endurance feats. And I think those are interesting. But I want to say that there's two parts about the immunity part that gets often overlooked. And that's one is that we talk a lot about microbiome. So our kind of bacterial grounds in our gut, and also, by the way, in our skin, we have a lot of bacterial. But there's also a microbiome. So both in our skin and our gut, we will have fungi no matter what. So even if you never consume fungi, you will have fungi in your gut. So bacteria and fungi live together. And some of them are friendly, some of them are not friendly. So think of candida or mold as a non-friendly one. And then there's many positive fungi in our gut. And that gets often overlooked. And you want to feed that positive. And that's a huge unlock into gut health. And then second part is the connection with the brain. We've often heard about the gut-brain connection, and that's very real into the point of mental health. So I believe something like 50% of dopamine and something like, is it 80% of serotonin is created in the gut. And a lot of the cognitive function boosting benefits are somehow related to gut health and vice versa. So when we look at things like adaptogens, we can look at it through an isolated system like the digestive system. We have 11 systems in our body. So think of like reproductive system, skeletal system, nervous system, circulatory system. So we can just focus on the digestive system, but particularly the digestive system, immunity, and brain power are very much a trifecta. There's huge impact on each one to the other one. So I would, if I would work on my gut, I would absolutely broaden it to include immune supporting products and brain promoting products.
Nice. When you talk about, I mean, I've heard, Paul Stamets, he talked about using turkey tail with his wife,
Mother.
I think it was, or mother that had cancer, mother actually. And, there's reported use of that anecdotally. So I find that's interesting. When it comes to functional mushrooms or even like turkey tail even, or if we look at the adaptogens like ashwagandha, like you said, which is crazy that it's overtaken green juice's search term. It is difficult to spell. What's your favorite like format for taking them? Do you prefer like a powdered format or a liquid format with is suspended in an alcohol, or what do you suggest people do, and what's the best way you find to take it?
Short answer is powdered extracts for most. I do tinctures at home because I know exactly what goes into them, but most commercial tinctures are a little bit of a black box from the amount of active ingredients. So we don't really know the concentration of the extract. We don't know, we don't kind of know what we're taking. And so they're very much prone to marketing hype. And also you are consuming alcohol or glycerin. And so you will have somewhat negative, binders or other ingredients. And then instead, when you take powdered extracts, the best ones are standardized to a certain concentration. And I would also avoid capsules and pills. There's a lot of enzymes and digestive process that starts when we taste our medicine. So I would recommend tasting it. And by the way, with capsules, it's especially good to taste them for quality purposes. A lot of these substances, most of the adaptogens and fungi are very bitter and unpleasant to, so if you open the capsule and it doesn't taste bitter, it probably means it's not a high quality product. If it tastes like grains or rice or something mild, then you probably know that you're not getting any of the health benefits, because a lot of these triterpenes, polysaccharides, saponins, polyphenols are very either bitter or earthy or, of other kind of strong flavor profiles. So I like to consume it in some way. I taste it and in a powdered extract form for most of these substances. But in my book, I kind of go exact dosing based on studies, exact format, and how you would even formulate with it. So I try to go, we went through over 1,000 research papers with my co-author to just kind of break it down for everyone exactly, but that would be like the blanket statement.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, a lot of people, like for instance, are not familiar with like opening a capsule. So just FYI, you can take it and sort of twist it and it'll open up and you can dump the contents out. I mean, David Wolf first got me into this when he was having me put like probiotics into like watermelon juice to make like watermelon kefir and like all sorts of like fermented things. So that was sort of fun. And I think you touched on an interesting point about bitterness. Like there's this, this term bitter medicine, and there is a lot of medicine in the bitters. Do you find that typical of mushrooms, typical of these adaptogens? They have this sort of bitter component in the flavor profile?
Yeah, and I guess the technical term is xenohormesis, so particularly used for plants, but I think applies as well to functional mushrooms. So basically, these plants and fungi and adaptogens, they build certain compounds to protect themselves against stressors. So a lot of the best adaptogens grow in high altitude or some other extreme environment, and they are attacked by bugs and weather, and they build these stressors. They have stress themselves, and from that stress, they create compounds that then when we ingest actually create stress. So the weird fact about, let's say, even like lectins is actually like good. Like it's kind of weird to understand, but as long as you bring it in at moderate dosages, you actually build your body to be stronger. So it's like a boot camp or like a HIIT workout or lifting heavy weights, and it will build your tolerance. So in the case of adaptogens, it's like a lot of these like saponins or phenols, like they actually like trigger they attack the body in a friendly way. Well, think about turmeric and the curcumin, especially when combined with black pepper or piperin, then kind of like creates this like spicy attack on the body, but then it triggers positive responses, the body to become stronger. So, anywhere from common allergens that I wouldn't necessarily recommend consuming, like wheat and soy and other things, but the whole body responds to these triggers. And if without these triggers, the body will be weak and fragile. So the good news with adaptogens is that they're not common allergens and you can use them and they support gut health, but they are definitely, like not stimulating, but they're eliciting a response from body that will make the body stronger, such as like with the functional mushrooms, like activating natural killer cell activity and therefore supporting your immunity.
Wow, what a year. We feel so privileged to bring you insights from experts from all over the world and so grateful to have you tune in. Thank you for being here and listening to the Food Matters podcast. We can't wait to share more amazing, insightful health conversations with you in 2024. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the full episodes mentioned today. And if there's anyone you would like us to interview for the Food Matters podcast, please let us know in the comments or send us a DM. So yes, thank you everyone for listening. I really enjoyed that talk. I hope you did too. And there will be more of these on the Food Matters podcast. So head to foodmatters.com and see you again.